Sometimes the wrong seat is the only way fate can find you. Claire Bennett tightened her grip on her daughter's tiny hand as they stepped into the grand ballroom of the Ashford Regency Hotel, and for a moment, she wished she had never come at all. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead like frozen stars, casting golden light across marble floors, and elegantly dressed guests who looked like they belonged on magazine covers instead of real life. Waiters in white gloves floated between tables carrying champagne flutes and silver trays of filet mignon, while a string quartet played softly near the dance floor. Everything about the wedding screamed old money, the kind Claire had only ever seen through storefront windows or television commercials. Beside her, 5-year-old Lily stared up in wide-eyed wonder. "Mommy," she whispered, tugging lightly on Claire's pale blue sleeve. "This place looks like a princess castle." Claire forced a smile despite the nervous knot in her stomach. "It does, baby." She smoothed down the wrinkles in her simple navy dress, silently regretting wearing the only formal outfit she owned. It had cost $98 from a clearance rack nearly 3 years ago, back when she still believed her marriage might survive. Now the fabric felt too thin, too plain, too obvious among designer gowns and sparkling diamonds. The invitation had come from her cousin Vanessa almost as an afterthought. Family obligation. Nothing more. Claire had almost declined, but Lily had begged to go after hearing there would be cake and dancing. So Claire had picked up an extra diner shift all week just to afford gas and a small gift from the registry. "Table assignments are over there," a hostess said politely, gesturing toward a massive display near the entrance. Claire approached with Lily beside her, but a crowd of guests blocked most of the names. She waited several awkward moments, balancing her purse on one shoulder while Lily leaned sleepily against her side. Somewhere across the ballroom, laughter erupted from a group of wealthy women dressed in shimmering gowns. Claire lowered her eyes instinctively. She knew that look people gave single mothers. Pity, mixed with quiet judgment. Especially young single mothers. Especially women attending weddings alone. After another minute, Lily pointed toward a nearby table tucked near the center of the ballroom. "Mommy, that one's empty." Claire followed her gaze. It was the only table with open seats nearby, elegantly decorated with white roses and gold candles. No one appeared to be sitting there yet. She hesitated. Maybe we should wait. But a server brushed past carrying drinks, and another wave of guests crowded around the seating chart. Lily looked exhausted. The drive from Baltimore had taken nearly 3 hours because of traffic, and Claire's daughter had fallen asleep twice in the car. "Just for a minute," Claire murmured finally. "Until things calmed down." They crossed the ballroom quietly, careful not to draw attention. Claire helped Lily into one of the velvet chairs before taking the seat beside her. Up close, the table looked even more expensive. Crystal place cards, gold-trimmed china, fresh orchids arranged perfectly in the center. Claire swallowed hard. Something about it felt wrong. "Mommy," Lily whispered, reaching for a dinner roll. "Can I have one?" Claire smiled softly. "Just one." Lily giggled and broke off a tiny piece while Claire glanced around nervously. Guests continued arriving, but strangely, nobody sat at their table. Instead, people walking past kept glancing toward them with confused expressions, then whispering. Claire's stomach tightened. A sharply dressed man near the bar suddenly froze mid-conversation when he noticed her. Another woman leaned toward her husband and murmured something while staring directly at Claire's chair. "Mommy," Lily whispered again, this time quieter, "why are people looking at us?" Before Claire could answer, the ballroom music shifted. Conversation slowed. Heads turned toward the entrance. And then he walked in. Ethan Carlisle moved through the ballroom with the calm confidence of a man accustomed to being watched. Tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in an impeccably tailored black tuxedo, he carried himself with effortless authority. Silver threaded faintly through his dark hair at the temples, and the expensive watch on his wrist caught the chandelier light as he adjusted his cufflinks. People immediately straightened when they saw him. Some smiled too eagerly. Others stepped aside instinctively. Claire recognized the name instantly, even before hearing someone whisper it nearby. Ethan Carlisle, billionaire chairman of Carlisle Holdings. One of the most powerful businessmen on the East Coast. She had seen his face on magazine covers while waiting in grocery store checkout lines. But in person, he looked colder somehow. Sharper. Like a man who trusted no one. He exchanged brief nods with guests as he walked deeper into the ballroom, clearly heading toward the center tables. Toward her table, Claire's pulse quickened. Oh no, the realization hit all at once. This wasn't just a VIP table. It was his table. Mommy, Lily asked softly, sensing the sudden tension in her mother's face. Claire immediately stood, nearly knocking over her chair in panic. Come on, sweetheart, she whispered quickly. We sat in the wrong place. But before she could grab her purse, Ethan Carlisle stopped directly beside the table. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Claire looked up nervously, expecting irritation, maybe embarrassment. Instead, the billionaire chairman simply stared at her for one long, unreadable moment. And then his eyes moved slowly to Lily. He didn't look away. Claire's fingers tightened around her purse strap as the entire ballroom fell into an uncomfortable silence. Ethan Carlisle stood beside the table without speaking, his dark eyes resting briefly on Lily before lifting to Claire again. Up close, he was even more intimidating than the photographs in magazines. There was nothing warm or approachable about him. Expensive, controlled, untouchable. Claire immediately lowered her gaze. I am so sorry, she said quickly, her voice barely above the music. We did not realize this table was reserved. We were just leaving. She reached for Lily's hand, already feeling heat creeping into her cheeks as nearby guests openly watched the scene unfold. A woman standing near the champagne tower whispered something to her companion, while another guest smirked openly. Claire knew exactly what they were thinking. Poor woman trying to sneak into a rich table. It was humiliating. Mommy, Lily whispered nervously, clutching the small dinner roll in her hands. Did I do something bad? Claire's heart twisted instantly. No, sweetheart. Of course not. She forced calm into her voice, even though her stomach felt tight with embarrassment. Before she could guide Lily away, another woman approached quickly from across the ballroom. Tall, elegant, and wearing a silver designer gown that probably cost more than Claire's monthly rent, she stopped beside Ethan with a tense smile. Mr. Carlisle, she said carefully, I apologize. There must have been some confusion with seating. Her eyes slid toward Claire with polite disapproval. This table is reserved for immediate family and executive guests only. Claire swallowed hard. I understand. We are leaving now. She bent slightly to help Lily down from the chair, but Lily's little shoe caught against the table leg. The child stumbled forward in surprise, and before Claire could stop it, the tiny glass of sparkling cider beside Lily tipped sideways. Golden liquid splashed directly across the silver gown of the elegant woman. A sharp gasp spread through the surrounding guests. The woman froze in horror as the stains spread down the front of her dress. Oh my God, Claire breathed, immediately grabbing napkins. I am so sorry. Lily's eyes filled instantly with tears. I did not mean to, she whispered shakily. The woman stepped back, staring at the wet fabric in disbelief. Do you have any idea what this dress cost? Her voice was sharp enough to make Lily flinch. Claire's face burned deeper. I will pay for cleaning, she said quickly, even though panic rose in her chest at the thought. Dry cleaning alone might wipe out half her paycheck from the diner. You will pay? The woman repeated incredulously. With what exactly? Several nearby guests laughed softly under their breath. Claire felt every pair of eyes in the ballroom on her now. She opened her mouth to apologize again, but Ethan Carlisle spoke first. Enough. The single word cut cleanly through the tension. Silence fell instantly. Even the woman beside him looked startled. Ethan's expression remained unreadable as he glanced once at the stain before looking back at Lily, who was trying desperately not to cry. It was an accident, he said calmly. Children spill things. But Mr. Carlisle, the woman protested softly. This is custom couture. Ethan barely looked at her. Then I assume you can afford another one. A stunned hush swept across the table. Claire blinked in disbelief. The woman's face flushed crimson, but she quickly forced a smile. Of course. Ethan finally turned fully toward Claire. Sit down. Claire stared at him, certain she had heard wrong. Excuse me. You heard me. His tone remained calm, almost detached, but there was something firm underneath it that made the entire room pay attention. Dinner has not started yet. There is no reason for your daughter to stand in a ballroom feeling frightened over spilled juice. Lily slowly looked up at him with watery blue eyes. Ethan's expression softened almost imperceptibly when he noticed the tears clinging to her lashes. What is your name? he asked her directly. Lily hesitated before answering in a tiny voice. Lily. Well, Lily, he said evenly. I think every wedding needs at least one accident, or people would die of boredom. A few uncomfortable laughs rippled through the nearby guests. To Claire's complete shock, Lily giggled softly through her tears. Ethan reached toward the bread basket at the center of the table and handed Lily a small frosted cupcake from a dessert tray. This one survived the tragedy. Lily accepted it carefully with both hands like it was something precious. Claire could barely process what was happening. Men like Ethan Carlisle did not notice women like her. They certainly did not defend them publicly in front of hundreds of wealthy guests. Yet he pulled out the chair beside him slightly and looked at Claire again. Please, he said quietly this time. Sit. Around them, the ballroom continued watching in stunned fascination. And somewhere near the back of the room, Claire heard someone whisper the words everyone else was clearly thinking. Why is Ethan Carlisle looking at her like that? Claire sat, slowly beside Lily again, painfully aware that nearly every guest in the ballroom was still watching their table. The soft music resumed, conversations gradually returning, but the tension lingered in the air like static before a storm. She kept waiting for Ethan Carlisle to walk away, to realize the awkward scene had lasted too long. But instead he calmly took the seat beside Lily as though nothing unusual had happened at all. Across the ballroom, several executives immediately changed direction and approached the table, eager to greet him. Mr. Carlisle, congratulations on the merger announcement, one older man said with an eager smile. Ethan nodded once. Thank you, Richard. Another man laughed nervously. The board has been trying to get 5 minutes of your time all month. Ethan's expression remained unreadable. Then they should schedule better meetings. The men laughed harder than the comment deserved. Claire lowered her eyes toward the tablecloth, suddenly feeling even more out of place. She had spent years serving wealthy customers at the diner during night shifts. She recognized this kind of power immediately. Everyone around Ethan seemed desperate for his approval, yet he barely appeared interested in any of them. Lily, however, stared at him curiously while nibbling frosting from the cupcake. You are really tall, she announced suddenly. Claire nearly choked on her water. Lily. But to Claire's shock, Ethan looked mildly amused. That is true. Lily tilted her head thoughtfully. You look like the prince in Frozen if he grew up and became grumpy. One of the executives accidentally coughed into his drink, trying not to laugh. Claire covered her face briefly in embarrassment. I am so sorry. Ethan looked directly at Lily. Grumpy. A little, she admitted honestly. But maybe only on the outside. The corner of Ethan's mouth moved slightly. Not quite a smile, but close enough that nearby guests immediately noticed. Claire saw two women near the dance floor staring openly now, whispering behind their champagne glasses. She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Lily likes talking to strangers, she explained quietly. No, Ethan said calmly his eyes still on the little girl. She likes talking to people who listen. The answer caught Claire off guard. Before she could respond, servers began placing salads around the table. Lily looked at the tiny arrangement of vegetables with deep suspicion. Mommy, she whispered loudly, is this rabbit food? Claire closed her eyes briefly. Ethan reached for his water glass, clearly hiding amusement this time. Lily, Claire warned softly. What? Lily asked innocently. I am just asking. Ethan finally looked fully at Claire for the first time since sitting down. How old is she? 5. 6 in October, Lily corrected proudly. And I can already read chapter books. Ethan nodded once. Impressive. Lily leaned slightly closer to him like they were sharing a secret. Mommy says I ask too many questions. Do you? Ethan asked. Maybe. She shrugged. But quiet people are sad sometimes. Claire noticed something shift very slightly in Ethan's face at those words. It was brief. So brief most people would never have caught it. But she did. Because she knew what loneliness looked like. She had lived with it for years. The ballroom lights reflected softly across Ethan's glass as he looked down at the table for a moment. And what makes you think that? He asked quietly. Lily answered without hesitation. Because Mommy gets quiet when she worries. Claire felt her chest tighten instantly. Sweetheart. But Lily continued innocently. Like when bills come in the mail. Claire's cheeks burned. Lily, that is enough. I am sorry. Lily whispered immediately, shrinking slightly in her seat. Ethan's voice softened unexpectedly. You do not have to apologize. He looked toward Claire again. Children notice more than adults think. Claire forced a small smile, though embarrassment twisted inside her. She notices everything. That can be dangerous, Ethan said quietly. Or lonely. For the first time since meeting him, Claire heard something human beneath the polished control in his voice. Not authority. Not power. Weariness. Before she could think of a response, a glamorous brunette approached their table with a bright social smile. Ethan, she said smoothly, touching his shoulder lightly. Everyone is wondering when you are finally coming over to the family table. Her eyes flicked briefly toward Claire and Lily before returning to him. Your mother especially. Ethan's expression cooled immediately. I am already seated. The woman's smile faltered slightly. Yes, but then she noticed Lily studying her sparkly earrings with fascination. Oh, hello there. Hi, Lily said politely. The brunette looked back at Ethan again, clearly confused by the situation unfolding in front of half the ballroom. Should I have another place setting brought over? Ethan did not even glance up from his wine glass. No. The woman hesitated another moment before finally walking away. Claire exhaled slowly once she was gone. Mr. Carlisle, Ethan, I really do not want to cause problems for you tonight. You are not. Claire glanced around at the endless stairs surrounding their table. It definitely feels like I am. Ethan followed her gaze briefly before looking back at her with calm indifference. People stare at anything they do not understand. Claire looked down at her folded hands. And what exactly do they not understand? Ethan's eyes lingered on her face a second longer than necessary. Why I cannot seem to look away from this table. For several seconds, Claire could not answer him. The noise of the ballroom faded into a distant blur beneath the steady sound of her own heartbeat. Ethan Carlisle's words had not been flirtatious. They had been calm, honest, and somehow that made them far more dangerous. Claire looked away first, lowering her eyes toward the untouched salad in front of her. People are probably creating entire stories in their heads already, she said quietly. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. They always do. Across the ballroom, guests continued sneaking glances toward their table between conversations and champagne toasts. Claire noticed her cousin Vanessa near the dance floor pretending not to stare while whispering frantically to her new husband. Even the wedding photographer had shifted direction twice, trying to capture photos near Ethan's table without making it obvious. Lily, however, seemed completely unaffected by the social tension surrounding them. She happily swung her little legs beneath the chair while carefully peeling frosting off the cupcake, one tiny piece at a time. Mommy says rich people are busy all the time, she announced suddenly. Claire nearly dropped her fork. Lily. Ethan's gaze moved toward the child again. Does she? Lily nodded seriously. That is why they always look tired in magazines. To Claire's horror, Ethan actually gave a soft laugh under his breath. Not polite. Not forced. Real. The sound immediately drew attention from nearby tables because apparently nobody there was used to hearing Ethan Carlisle laugh at all. Claire stared at him in surprise before quickly looking away again. I promise she is usually shy around strangers. I am not shy, Lily corrected. I just decide if people feel nice first. Ethan rested one arm casually against the table. And what was your decision about me? Lily studied him carefully with all the seriousness only children could manage. I think you forgot how to smile for a long time. Silence settled briefly between them. Claire saw Ethan's expression shift almost invisibly again. It was becoming clear that Lily had somehow wandered past all the walls adults usually hit around him. Lily, Claire said gently, that is enough questions for tonight. It is all right. Ethan's voice remained calm. Claire shook her head softly. No, it is not. She gets curious when she is nervous. Ethan glanced toward Lily. Are you nervous? Lily shrugged slightly. A little. Why? Because Mommy worked extra shifts all week so we could come here. Claire froze instantly. Sweetheart. But Lily continued innocently, unaware of the ache suddenly tightening in Claire's chest. She almost did not come because gas was expensive and my dress shoes hurt her feet in the store. Claire closed her eyes briefly in embarrassment. Lily, honey. But I told her weddings are important because princesses meet people there. Lily smiled proudly at Ethan. And I was right. Ethan's gaze slowly lifted toward Claire again. This time the look in his eyes felt different. Less curiosity, more understanding. Claire hated that. She hated pity more than anything. She straightened slightly in her chair and forced a composed smile. I am sorry. She talks when she gets tired. Children usually tell the truth when adults are trying hardest to hide it, Ethan said quietly. Claire's fingers tightened around her napkin. There is nothing dramatic to hide. I work hard. That is all. 2 jobs, Ethan asked calmly. She looked up sharply. How did you know? You look exhausted. The answer was simple, direct, somehow impossible to argue with. Claire looked down again, suddenly aware of every sleepless night reflected beneath her eyes. The early mornings at the diner, the afternoon bookkeeping shifts at a local auto shop, the unpaid bills hidden in kitchen drawers so Lily would not see them. Life happens, she said softly after a moment. Ethan studied her face in silence. And Lily's father? Claire's entire body stiffened instinctively. Ethan noticed immediately. You do not have to answer. Claire exhaled slowly. He left before she was born. Ethan's expression did not change, but his attention sharpened slightly. I am sorry. Claire almost laughed at the irony of hearing sympathy from a billionaire chairman while surrounded by crystal chandeliers and million-dollar jewelry. It was a long time ago. Not long enough if it still hurts when you say it. The observation landed too close to the truth. Claire glanced away toward the ballroom lights, blinking once before forcing herself steady again. You are surprisingly observant for someone everyone says never notices people. Ethan's gaze lingered on her profile. Maybe I finally saw someone worth noticing. The orchestra shifted into a slower melody while couples began moving toward the dance floor. Soft golden light shimmered across the ballroom as servers refreshed wine glasses around the tables. Nearby guests continued watching them openly now. Claire could practically feel the curiosity spreading through the room. Ethan Carlisle never behaved like this publicly. Never. You really should go back to your family table, Claire said quietly after a moment. People are starting to stare more. Ethan glanced around briefly before returning his attention to her. Does that bother you? Claire gave a small humorless smile. I spent years learning how invisible single mothers become in rooms like this. Trust me, I know exactly when people are looking. For the first time all evening, Ethan's expression darkened slightly. Not anger, something closer to regret. Before he could respond, an older gray-haired man approached the table quickly with obvious surprise on his face. He stopped beside Ethan and blinked directly at Claire. Then his eyes widened slightly with recognition. Wait, he said slowly. I know you. Claire frowned in confusion as the man continued staring at her. You used to work for Carlisle Group, did you not? Claire felt the blood drain from her face. The older man standing beside the table adjusted his glasses slightly, still studying her with growing certainty. Around them, several nearby conversations quieted again as guests sensed another unexpected moment unfolding around Ethan Carlisle's table. I knew I recognized you, the man continued. Claire Bennett, right? Claire swallowed hard before nodding slowly. Yes. The man looked genuinely surprised. You worked in the Baltimore branch 3 years ago. Operations Support Division. Ethan's eyes shifted toward Claire immediately. You worked for Carlisle Group? Claire looked suddenly uncomfortable beneath his attention. Briefly, the older man repeated with a laugh of disbelief. You were the young woman who stayed overnight during the winter outage. Ethan's expression sharpened slightly. What outage? The Norland Systems crash, the man explained. Whole branch nearly lost a $6 million logistics contract because half the staff walked out during that blizzard. He looked back at Claire. You stayed 30 hours straight helping rebuild shipment records. Claire lowered her eyes quickly. It was part of the job. No, the man corrected gently. It absolutely was not. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair, still watching her carefully. And then, the older man frowned now as though trying to remember details. You disappeared not long after that. Claire's fingers tightened subtly around her napkin. I had personal reasons. The man's expression softened with understanding. Right. The pregnancy. Claire froze completely. Across the table, Ethan went still. Pregnancy, he repeated quietly. Claire forced herself to answer calmly despite the sudden pressure building in her chest. I left during my 2nd trimester. The older executive nodded sympathetically. I remember now. Human Resources said you refused extended assistance from the company. Ethan's gaze never left Claire's face. You were offered assistance? Claire gave a small shrug. A temporary support program. I declined. Why? Ethan asked. Because other people needed it more. The answer came naturally, almost automatically. But the silence that followed told Claire immediately it had affected him more than she intended. The older executive shook his head slowly. I remember your manager speaking highly of you for months afterward. Claire looked genuinely uncomfortable now. That was a long time ago. Still, the man said kindly, you were one of the few employees people remembered. Before Claire could respond, another guest called the executive away from across the ballroom. He excused himself politely, leaving behind a strange quiet at the table once again. Ethan remained silent several moments after the man disappeared into the crowd. Lily had become distracted coloring on a paper napkin with crayons from her little purse, completely unaware of the tension around the adults. Finally, Ethan spoke. You never mentioned you worked for my company. Claire gave a faint, humorless smile. Most people do not introduce themselves by listing old jobs at weddings. No, Ethan admitted calmly. But most people would have mentioned staying 30 hours during a blizzard. Claire looked down at the tablecloth. It sounds more dramatic than it was. You could have left. So could everyone else. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. But they did leave. Claire hesitated briefly before answering. The older warehouse workers could not get home safely in the storm. Somebody had to stay and help reroute deliveries manually. Ethan watched her in complete silence now. Claire suddenly felt exposed in a way she hated. Like pieces of her life were being uncovered one layer at a time beneath the ballroom lights. You are looking at me like I am some kind of tragic story, she said quietly. I am not. No, Ethan said softly. You are not. Something in his voice made her glance back up. There was no pity there. Only focus, interest, respect. Somehow that unsettled her even more. Lily suddenly held up her drawing proudly toward Ethan. Look. Ethan took the paper carefully. It was a child's sketch of the ballroom with oversized chandeliers and tiny stick figures sitting around a table. One tall figure stood beside a much smaller little girl holding a cupcake. That is me, Lily explained, pointing at herself. And that is Mommy. Then she pointed toward the tallest figure on the page. And that is you. Ethan studied the drawing longer than expected. You made me very tall. You are tall. Lily looked thoughtful for a moment before adding quietly. But you do not look lonely in this picture anymore. Claire felt the entire atmosphere at the table shift again after those words. Ethan stared down at the drawing another second before carefully setting it beside his plate instead of handing it back. Nearby guests were openly watching now, confused fascination spreading through the ballroom. Claire noticed two women near the bar whispering intensely while glancing repeatedly toward Ethan. One of them discreetly raised her phone as if taking photos. Claire's anxiety returned immediately. This is becoming a spectacle, she murmured softly. Ethan did not seem remotely bothered. Let them watch. That is easy for someone like you to say. His gaze lifted toward her slowly. Someone like me? Claire hesitated. Powerful. Untouchable. Ethan's expression darkened faintly at the word untouchable. That is usually just another word for alone. Claire looked at him carefully then, really looked at him beyond the expensive tuxedo and controlled exterior. For the first time all evening, she noticed how tired he actually seemed beneath the polished image. Not physically, emotionally, like someone who had spent years carrying responsibilities heavy enough to hollow out entire parts of himself. Before she could stop herself, she asked quietly, when was the last time you attended something like this because you actually wanted to? Ethan held her gaze for several long seconds. Then, with complete honesty, he answered, I cannot remember. Claire did not know why Ethan's answer stayed with her long after the conversation moved on. Maybe because there had been no performance in it. No billionaire charm. Just quiet honesty from a man everyone else in the ballroom seemed terrified to disappoint. Around them, dinner service continued beneath the soft glow of chandeliers while crystal glasses clinked and guests drifted toward the dance floor. Yet despite the music and laughter surrounding them, Claire increasingly felt as though the rest of the room existed somewhere far away from their table. Lily had finally grown sleepy after the long drive and excitement of the evening. She leaned against Claire's shoulder, tiny fingers curled loosely around the edge of her paper drawing. Ethan noticed immediately. It is past her bedtime, he said quietly. Claire smiled faintly as she brushed soft blonde curls away from Lily's forehead. She fought sleep all afternoon because she was afraid she would miss the wedding. I am not tired, Lily mumbled without opening her eyes. Ethan looked mildly unconvinced. Of course not. Lily peeked at him sleepily. You sound different when you talk to me. Claire glanced toward him curiously. Different how? Lily thought carefully before answering. Softer. Ethan looked genuinely caught off guard by the observation. Claire almost smiled at the rare sight of someone leaving the powerful chairman temporarily speechless. Children notice everything, she reminded him quietly. Ethan's gaze lingered briefly on Lily before shifting toward Claire again. Apparently they do. Across the ballroom, applause suddenly erupted as the bride and groom stepped onto the dance floor for their first dance. Guests gathered closer while cameras flashed beneath the golden lights. Claire watched the newlyweds sway together slowly while the orchestra played a soft, romantic melody. Something inside her tightened unexpectedly. Once upon a time, she had stood in a white dress believing love alone could build a future. Now she mostly measured life in overdue bills, grocery budgets, and surviving one exhausting week at a time. Ethan seemed to notice the sadness that crossed her expression. You are thinking about something painful. Claire let out a quiet breath. You always do that. Do what? Read people like business reports. To her surprise, Ethan actually looked amused again. Only the interesting ones. Claire shook her head softly. You barely know me. I know enough to understand you are used to carrying everything alone. The words landed too close to the truth once again. Claire looked down at Lily sleeping against her shoulder. You do what you have to when there is a child depending on you. Ethan's eyes softened almost imperceptibly as he watched the sleeping little girl. And nobody helps you? Claire hesitated. Not really. Family. Claire gave a small humorless laugh. Most of my family stopped calling after the divorce. Ethan frowned slightly. Why? Because single mothers make people uncomfortable. The bitterness slipped out before she could stop it. She immediately regretted saying it aloud. But Ethan did not look uncomfortable. If anything, he looked thoughtful. That says more about them than you. Claire looked at him carefully then. You really do not understand what normal life looks like anymore, do you? Instead of appearing offended, Ethan considered the question seriously. Probably not. The honesty surprised her again. Most wealthy men she had met spent their lives pretending to relate to everyone around them. Ethan Carlisle did not pretend anything. There was a time when I did, he said quietly after a moment. Before the company became too large. Before every conversation started sounding transactional. Claire rested her chin lightly against Lily's hair. That sounds lonely. Ethan gave a faint nod. It is efficient. That is not the same thing. Their eyes met briefly across the candlelit table, and for one strange moment Claire felt something shift between them. Not romance. Not yet. Recognition. Two exhausted people from completely different worlds. Somehow understanding the same ache. Before either of them could speak again, a sharply dressed assistant approached Ethan's side, carrying a tablet. Mr. Carlisle, the man said carefully, the investors from Chicago have arrived. They are requesting a private conversation before tomorrow's announcement. Ethan's expression cooled slightly at the interruption. Tell them tomorrow exists for a reason. The assistant hesitated. Sir, they flew in tonight specifically for tomorrow, Ethan repeated calmly. The assistant immediately nodded and stepped away. Claire stared at him in disbelief. You just ignored investors for us? Ethan reached for his water glass. I postpone people all the time. Yes, but usually not for strangers at weddings. His gaze lifted toward her again. You stopped feeling like strangers a while ago. Before Claire could process the meaning behind the statement, another voice suddenly cut into the moment. Ethan, there you are. A stunning brunette in a deep emerald gown approached the table with practiced elegance and cool confidence. Her diamond bracelet caught the chandelier light as she stopped beside Ethan's chair. Claire instantly recognized the type of woman she was. Wealthy, sophisticated, beautiful in the polished way magazine covers loved. The woman glanced briefly at Claire and Lily before returning her attention to Ethan with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Your mother has been searching everywhere for you. Ethan's expression became unreadable again. I am aware. The woman finally looked directly at Claire now, her gaze politely assessing every detail from Claire's inexpensive dress to the sleeping child in her lap. I do not believe we have met. Claire straightened slightly. Claire Bennett. Vanessa Beaumont, the woman replied smoothly. Then after the smallest pause, she added, Ethan and I used to be engaged. The temperature at the table seemed to change instantly after Vanessa Beaumont's introduction. Claire felt it immediately. The polished smile. The careful posture. The subtle way nearby guests suddenly became even more interested in Ethan Carlisle's table than before. Vanessa stood beside Ethan with effortless elegance, every detail about her perfectly composed beneath the ballroom lights. Her dark hair fell in soft waves over one shoulder, and the massive diamond on her right hand flashed each time she moved. Not an engagement ring anymore, but still impossible to ignore. Claire shifted Lily slightly in her lap, suddenly aware once again of her simple dress, tired eyes, and the little girl sleeping against her shoulder. She did not belong in whatever complicated world existed between Ethan and Vanessa Beaumont. Claire Bennett. Vanessa repeated smoothly, as though testing the name for significance. I do not believe I have seen you at any Carlisle events before. That is because I have never attended one, Claire answered politely. Vanessa's eyes flicked briefly toward Lily. And this is your daughter? Yes. She is adorable. The compliment sounded practiced, refined, empty. Lily stirred sleepily against Claire before opening her eyes halfway. Mommy, she murmured softly, I do not feel good. Claire immediately touched the child's forehead and frowned slightly at the warmth there. You are probably just overtired, sweetheart. Ethan noticed the concern in her expression instantly. Is she all right? She has mild asthma, Claire explained quietly. Long drives sometimes wear her out. Vanessa crossed her arms lightly. Children should probably not be kept out this late at formal events. The comment was delivered pleasantly enough that nobody else would question it. But Claire heard the judgment underneath immediately. Before she could respond, Ethan's voice cut calmly through the tension. Lily seems perfectly fine to me. Vanessa's smile tightened almost invisibly. Of course. She looked back toward Ethan. Your mother is still waiting. Ethan did not move. Then she is demonstrating patience. A nearby guest accidentally laughed before quickly pretending to cough into his champagne. Vanessa's polished expression cracked for half a second before recovering. Claire suddenly understood something important. Ethan Carlisle intimidated everyone in this room equally, including the woman who had once been engaged to him. You disappeared tonight, Vanessa said quietly, lowering her voice slightly. People are talking. Ethan finally looked at her directly. People always talk. Vanessa's gaze shifted meaningfully toward Claire, usually for less obvious reasons. Claire felt heat rise to her face immediately. She opened her mouth to excuse herself, but Ethan spoke first. Careful, Vanessa. The warning in his voice was soft, calm, but unmistakable. Vanessa held his gaze a second too long before exhaling slowly. I am simply trying to protect you from unnecessary gossip. No, Ethan replied evenly. You are trying to control a narrative. The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut glass. Claire suddenly wished more than anything that she could quietly disappear from the ballroom with Lily before becoming the center of some wealthy social war she never asked to enter. As though sensing her discomfort, Lily shifted weakly again against Claire's shoulder. Mommy, she whispered, breathing slightly uneven now. My chest hurts. Claire's attention snapped fully back to her daughter. Lily. She touched the little girl's forehead again and felt more heat than before. Panic immediately tightened in her chest. Sweetheart, where is your inhaler? Lily blinked sleepily. In the car. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Of course it was. She had switched purses before leaving the apartment and forgotten to transfer it over. Ethan was already standing before she even finished processing the problem. What does she need? It is probably nothing, Claire said too quickly. I just need to get her inhaler from the parking garage. But Lily's breathing had become noticeably tighter now, small breaths working harder than normal. Ethan's expression changed instantly. All traces of detached billionaire calm disappeared beneath sharp focus. How far is your car? The south garage. That is a 10-minute walk from here, Ethan said immediately. Claire stood carefully with Lily in her arms. I can handle it. Ethan reached for his jacket without hesitation. No. We are going now. Vanessa stared at him in disbelief. Ethan, the wedding speeches start in 15 minutes. He did not even look at her. Then they can start. Without me. You cannot seriously be leaving your own cousin's reception for someone you met an hour ago. Ethan finally turned toward her fully, and for the first time all evening his voice carried unmistakable steel beneath the calm. A little girl is struggling to breathe, Vanessa. The ballroom around them had grown noticeably quieter again. Nearby guests openly watched the confrontation unfolding at the chairman's table. Vanessa glanced around, realizing too late how many people had heard her. That is not what I meant. Ethan's attention had already returned to Claire. Can you carry her? Claire nodded quickly despite the fear building inside her chest. Yes. Ethan stepped beside her immediately. I will take you to the garage. Claire hesitated. You really do not have to, Claire. His voice softened slightly this time. You stopped being a stranger to me a while ago, remember? For one suspended moment, the ballroom, the wedding, the gossip, all of it seemed to disappear around them. Claire stared at him beneath the golden chandelier lights, overwhelmed by the strange certainty in his eyes. Then Lily coughed weakly against her shoulder, and Ethan gently placed one steady hand against Claire's back as he guided them toward the exit, while half the ballroom watched in stunned silence. Cool night air rushed over Claire's face the moment they stepped outside the ballroom doors. The sudden quiet beyond the music felt unreal after the overwhelming pressure of the reception inside. Ethan stayed close beside her as they crossed the grand hotel lobby toward the elevators leading down to the parking garage. Lily rested weakly against Claire's shoulder, her small breaths uneven enough now that panic pressed heavily against Claire's ribs. Sweetheart, stay with me, Claire whispered softly, brushing trembling fingers through her daughter's curls. I am okay, Lily murmured sleepily, though her breathing tightened again halfway through the sentence. Ethan immediately pressed the elevator button harder than necessary. The doors opened within seconds. Once inside, Claire shifted Lily carefully in her arms while Ethan removed his tuxedo jacket without hesitation and draped it gently around the child's shoulders. She is cold, he said quietly. Claire looked up at him in surprise. You really notice everything. Only things that matter. The elevator descended in silence except for the soft mechanical hum and Lily's strained breathing. Claire stared at the floor numbers while trying desperately to stay calm. I should have checked the inhaler before we left home, she whispered mostly to herself. I never forget it. Ethan leaned lightly against the elevator wall beside her. Parents are allowed to be human. Claire gave a weak laugh, filled with exhaustion. Single mothers usually do not get that luxury. Ethan's jaw tightened faintly at the words. The elevator doors finally opened to the underground garage. The concrete space echoed with distant engines and fluorescent lights humming overhead. Claire hurried toward the far section where her old silver Honda Civic sat parked near a support pillar. Ethan stayed beside her without question, his polished dress shoes clicking sharply against the cement floor. Claire unlocked the passenger side quickly and reached into her purse. Please be here. For one terrible second, she could not find the inhaler, and pure panic flooded her chest. Then her fingers closed around the small blue device buried beneath receipts and crayons. Thank God. She immediately helped Lily take several careful breaths from the inhaler. Within moments, the little girl's breathing began easing slightly. Claire closed her eyes briefly in relief. Better? Ethan asked quietly. Lily nodded weakly against the jacket wrapped around her shoulders. A little. Claire sank back against the car door, emotionally drained now that the immediate fear had passed. Ethan watched her carefully beneath the harsh garage lights. You were terrified. Claire laughed shakily. That tends to happen when your child struggles to breathe. Ethan's expression remained serious. You handle fear very quietly. Because mothers do not get to fall apart first. The answer came automatically. Years of survival packed into one sentence. Ethan stared at her for several seconds before speaking again. Who takes care of you? Claire blinked. In surprise. What? You spend all your energy protecting everyone else. His voice softened slightly. Who protects you? Claire looked away immediately because the question hurt more than it should have. That is not really how life works. Ethan stepped closer slowly, not enough to invade her space. Just enough that she could feel the steady calm of his presence beside her. Maybe it should. Claire's throat tightened unexpectedly. No one had asked her that in years. Not family. Not friends. Certainly not a man like Ethan Carlisle. Lily shifted sleepily between them and looked up at Ethan through half-open eyes. You stayed, she whispered. Ethan's attention immediately softened again as he crouched slightly to her level. Of course I stayed. Lily studied him seriously for a moment despite her exhaustion. Most people leave when things get hard. Something passed through Ethan's face then. Quick. Painful. Familiar. Claire noticed it instantly. Not everyone, he answered quietly. Lily leaned against Claire again, clearly exhausted now. Mommy says people show who they are when nobody needs to impress anyone anymore. Ethan slowly looked back up at Claire after hearing that. Your mother sounds smarter than most executives I know. Claire smiled faintly despite herself. She mostly says things like that while paying bills at 2 in the morning. The fluorescent lights above cast pale shadows across the garage, while distant traffic echoed faintly somewhere beyond the concrete walls. For the first time all evening, there were no staring guests around them. No whispers. No ballroom politics. Just 3 tired people standing beside an old car in the middle of the night. Ethan glanced toward the worn interior of Claire's Civic where a child's booster seat sat, surrounded by grocery bags and folded diner uniforms. His eyes lingered briefly on a stack of overdue envelopes shoved partially beneath the passenger seat before he looked away respectfully. Claire noticed anyway. Embarrassment immediately crept back into her chest. It is not usually this messy. Ethan looked genuinely confused by the apology. Claire. His voice was calm again. You are raising a child. Alone while working multiple jobs. The fact that your daughter feels safe enough to fall asleep in your arms tells me you are doing remarkably well. Claire stared at him in silence. Nobody had ever said something like that to her before. People complimented hardworking mothers all the time in superficial ways. But this felt different. Honest. Like he actually meant it. Lily's head drooped sleepily against Claire's shoulder again. Ethan glanced toward the elevator leading back to the ballroom. Then toward the tired child. You should not drive 3 hours tonight after everything. Claire frowned slightly. I do not really have another option. Ethan reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out a sleek black hotel keycard. Yes, you do. Claire immediately shook her head. No, Claire, I cannot accept that. Ethan stepped closer again, his expression calm but firm. It is a private suite upstairs that will sit empty tonight. You and Lily need rest. Claire tightened her grip on her daughter instinctively. You barely know me. Ethan's eyes held hers steadily beneath the cold garage lights. That is the strange part, he said quietly. It feels like I do. Claire stared at the black hotel keycard resting in Ethan's hand, while uncertainty twisted painfully inside her chest. Everything about the situation felt impossible. Men like Ethan Carlisle did not walk strangers to parking garages. They did not carry jackets for sick children or quietly notice overdue bills hidden beneath passenger seats. And they definitely did not offer private hotel suites to exhausted single mothers they had met only hours earlier. I cannot, Claire whispered again, though her voice lacked conviction this time. Ethan remained calm beside her beneath the fluorescent garage lights. Why? Claire gave a soft, incredulous laugh. Because people like me do not accept favors like this from people like you. Ethan's expression sharpened slightly. People like you. He repeated the words carefully, as though he disliked them. You keep saying that. Claire shifted Lily gently against her shoulder. You know exactly what I mean. No, Ethan said quietly. I do not think I do. Claire looked away toward the concrete floor. You live in a world where problems disappear with one phone call. Ethan's gaze stayed fixed on her. And you live in one where you think accepting help makes you weak. The silence that followed felt strangely intimate in the empty garage. Claire hated how easily he seemed to see through her defenses. I learned a long time ago not to depend on people, she admitted softly. Ethan looked at her for several seconds before answering. Someone taught you that lesson cruelly. It was not a question. Claire swallowed hard. Lily's father made promises right up until the day he left. Ethan's jaw tightened faintly. Coward. Claire blinked in surprise at the quiet anger in his voice. You do not even know him. I know he abandoned a woman who deserved better and a little girl who still looks for reassurance every time she cannot breathe. Claire looked down immediately, emotions catching painfully in her throat. Nobody had defended her in a very long time. Certainly not like that. Lily stirred sleepily between them. Mommy, I am here, sweetheart. Lily's small fingers curled weakly against Claire's dress before she looked toward Ethan again. Are you coming too? Claire froze instantly. Ethan's expression softened as he crouched slightly beside the child. Only if your mother says yes. Lily thought about that seriously despite her exhaustion. I think you should come because Mommy smiles less when she is worried. Claire let out a quiet breath somewhere between embarrassment and heartbreak. Ethan glanced up toward her slowly. She is observant. Too observant. Ethan stood again, still holding the keycard loosely between his fingers. Claire, I am not offering charity. Then what are you offering? The question escaped before she could stop it. Ethan's eyes held hers steadily in the cold garage light. Peace for one night. The answer hit harder than she expected, because deep down, Claire could not remember the last time she had experienced peace. Real peace. Not survival. Not exhaustion collapsing into temporary sleep before another double shift. Peace. Ethan extended the keycard toward her again. There is a pediatric urgent care clinic connected to the hotel if Lily's breathing worsens tonight. Room service. Clean sheets. A locked door where nobody expects anything from you for a few hours. Claire stared at the card without taking it. Why are you doing this? Ethan looked genuinely thoughtful for a moment before answering. Because somewhere along the way I forgot what genuine people looked like. His voice lowered slightly. Then tonight a little girl handed me a crooked cupcake and told me I looked lonely. Claire felt tears threaten unexpectedly behind her eyes. She looked away quickly before he could notice. But Ethan noticed everything. He stepped closer slowly, still careful not to crowd her. Claire. His voice was quieter now. Gentler. You do not have to fight every battle alone tonight. For several long seconds, she simply stood there listening to the distant hum of traffic beyond the garage walls while Lily slept against her shoulder and Ethan Carlisle waited patiently in front of her like a man with nowhere else he wanted to be. Finally, Claire reached forward and accepted the keycard with trembling fingers. Relief softened Ethan's expression almost invisibly. Thank you, she whispered. You do not have to thank me. But she did, because nobody had looked at her the way Ethan did all evening. Not with pity, not with judgment, with care. And somehow that felt far more dangerous. Ethan opened the passenger door of her old Honda before she could protest and helped settle Lily carefully into her booster seat. The little girl blinked sleepily at him while clutching his tuxedo jacket around her shoulders. You forgot this, Claire said softly, holding the jacket toward him once Lily was secured. Ethan looked at the oversized black fabric wrapped around the sleepy child. Keep it tonight. Claire hesitated. Ethan, Claire. His voice carried the faintest trace of warmth now. It looks better there anyway. For the first time all evening, she smiled without forcing it. A real smile. Tired and small, but real enough that Ethan stared at her a second longer than necessary beneath the fluorescent lights. Something unreadable moved through his expression then. Almost wonder. As though he had spent years surrounded by beautiful things that meant nothing and suddenly found himself undone by one honest smile from a woman standing beside an old Honda in a parking garage. Claire noticed the way he looked at her and quickly glanced down, her heartbeat suddenly uneven for reasons that had nothing to do with fear anymore. Ethan slowly closed the passenger door after Lily settled against the seat. The suite is on the top floor, he said quietly. Use the private elevator in the lobby. Claire nodded once. Will I see you again? The question slipped out before she could stop it. Ethan's eyes lifted back to hers instantly. Neither of them spoke for one suspended moment. Then slowly, very slowly, he smiled for the first time that night. Claire, he said softly, I do not think this story ends in a parking garage.